Welcome to Coach Bennett's podcast, where every run has a purpose, where kindness is hardcore, where this is about running, and this is not about running, where every starting line is a finish line in disguise, where rambling still gets you where you need to be, where pineapple will never ruin your pizza, and the sodas, adult and not adult kind, are always cold, and where there is room on the starting line for everybody. I'm Coach Bennett. Thank you for letting me be a part of your day. Let's get started. Welcome to episode 68 of Coach Bennett's podcast. Now, let me just tell you real quick, I'm not going to get on some history thing here, but having taught a class called 20th Century History when I was teaching high school, I got to tell you, when I hear 68, I think of 1968, and woo, baby. I mean, that is a year to talk about, to teach about, to listen to stories about, to watch films and documentaries about, to listen to the music of that year. Woo, 1968. But that's not what this episode is actually about. This episode is entitled Survive and Advance. Now, I'll tell you where I heard that term from first. It comes from, at least as far as I know, Jim Valvano, who was the great NC State basketball coach. And in 1983, they made this improbable march to the championship game and won the NCAA championship in a maybe the greatest upset up until that point. They had 9 straight games basically where if they lost, the season was over. And it was one of those things where they had to win for the season to continue. And that had started back in the ACC tournament. So their mantra became basically survive and advance. And I'm kind of loosely using the term for this, but it was the first thing that came to mind when I thought about this particular episode. And little side note about Jim Valvano. Obviously, he is someone who passed away years ago, gave one of the great speeches, really, I think, ever at the ESPYs. And in that speech, if you remember it, this was back when I was in high school. I want to say it was 1993. He had the famous lines, "Don't give up, don't ever give up." But the entire speech is worth listening to. Those are the lines that are probably most famous. Don't give up, don't ever give up. But there's some stuff in there that is worth listening to repeatedly. I mean, one of the things that he tells the audience, not just in the theater with him, but also everywhere, that you should spend some time every day thinking, laughing, crying, just some really great words. So if you know what I'll do, I'll put a link to Valvano's speech, and also I'll have you know he was the point guard in college for Rutgers University. I'll also have you know Rutgers University is the state university of, you guessed it, New Jersey. So everything in some way comes back to the land of milk and honey. But this is going to be entitled Survive and Advance. Now, let's go back to Jersey, because before we start the episode, I'm just going to tell you what I've been doing in the last week since we talked last. Well, I was actually in New Jersey. I was in the Garden State, and I was there to see the boss, Bruce Springsteen, on the beach in Asbury Park. This was as epic a concert as I mean, I'm trying to create a more epic concert in my head. I'm not sure if there will be one that I'm going to get to go to for the rest of my life that'll be more epic than seeing Bruce Springsteen live in New Jersey on the beach in Asbury Park. If you know anything about the boss, you know how special Asbury Park is to him. The E Street Band is named after E Street in Asbury Park. He's got his first albums, Greetings from Asbury Park. I mean, this was just really an unbelievable, absolutely beautiful night with 30+ thousand other people on the beach. And the vibe was that. It was special. Everyone kind of was pinching themselves all night long. It was a really cool feeling that was going around, that was shared with the crowd. Knowing that, we never thought this was going to happen. Getting to see Bruce maybe, at the Meadowlands, what was Giant Stadium is now MetLife Stadium. Getting to see him at Madison Square Garden. I mean, these are all incredible things to get to do. But to get to see him outside on the beach, on the boardwalk in New Jersey was just crazy. And he put on what many long-time hardcore Springsteen fans are saying maybe one of the best performances he's ever put on, which is just going to maybe be an inspiration for a future episode. But let me just tell you why I want to talk about that right now. Bruce is like 73, okay? He's put out so much music. He has been playing live for so long. He's legendary, not just for the quality of his music as you know, a songwriter, as a singer, but as a performer. He's known for throwing down concerts that are 3+ hours long consistently. Just dozens of songs and pouring his heart out when he plays. And everyone, you know, if you listen to someone, whether they're 75, 65, 55, 45, 35, 25 years old, 15 years old, they're all going to tell you their favorite Bruce Springsteen concert. And you're going to hear about the great, you know, tours in the late 70s and the, you know, mid 80s and the late 80s, early 90s. Everyone has their stuff. And early 2000s with, you know, after The Rising came out. And for him to be playing in front of so many people that have seen him so many times and have many of them walk away after seeing him, this was their 10th time, 20th time, 30th time, for them to walk away and say that may be his best performance is inspiring. And I think you can take that and bring it into your running, because people always say, you know, it gets hard to be a runner because as you get older, you know, you don't set any more personal bests. And I think that's complete and total horse crap. Maybe you'll never run a faster mile or 5K or marathon, but it doesn't mean you can't have a best performance ever, unless you're, you know, have such insane tunnel vision that you're associating best with only a time. I mean, fine. If that's the only metric you're willing to tag along with best, then yeah, maybe you won't. But there's got to be more. There's got to be more to it. And I thought, you know, maybe he was able to run around the stage more. Maybe his voice was a little stronger back then. You know, maybe the concert could have been 35 minutes longer if he had only been 52 instead of 73. You know, maybe if it was right after Born in the USA came out, or Born to Run, or, you know, The River, and there was excitement around this new music. Okay. But guess what? All of that being a part of the, I guess, judgment of what kind of a concert it was, you still had people walking off saying, I think this might have been the best one. And why? Well, because he had the passion. He knew how important it was to be on a stage in Asbury Park in New Jersey and sing to all of these people. And we knew how important it was. So maybe we brought some of the magic. He brought some of the magic. And together we had one of the best performances by Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band ever. So it's just something to remember, that don't give up on your best performance not having happened just yet. It may be today. It may be tomorrow. It may be 5 years from now. And also, do not diminish the best performances you've already had. That's what I'm trying to say. So anyway, it was a really unbelievable concert. I'll put a link up, obviously, to, you know, one of the songs he played. He ended with Jersey Girl, which is a Tom Waits song, actually. But just, you know, so beautiful. Anyway, I'll put some links up there in the show notes. It was pretty amazing. I also got some good runs in there. I got to see my kids, too, which is always amazing. They're back at school in the city. And got to go to a Yankee game with my daughter and some of her friends on the cross-country team. And Yankee Stadium was gorgeous, and the game was a complete and total disaster. Complete disaster. We got completely waxed by the dreaded Boston Red Sox, but, you know, they're not going to make it to the playoffs, and we are, so the joke's on them. But anyway, that was a rough day. Anyway, it was a really good time, and here we are, episode 68, Survive and Advance. So I'll give you a backstory about what this episode is really about and why we're talking about it, all right? September. That's the backstory. September. Now, I used to coach high school. September is when we would come back to school in New Jersey. And you would think this would be like just an unbelievably great, positive thing if you're a coach, knowing the kids are coming back to school. It's going to be 5 days a week. They're going to have a routine. We're going to practice every day after school. We're going to be able to work out a little bit harder. There's going to be meets, starting up. And, you would think from a coaching point of view, getting these kids back to school, set routine would be awesome. I'll tell you what, it was the opposite. And it was because we were going from summer to school. We were going from a situation where the kids for 3 months had a very different schedule. And I mean that in every possible way. When they were waking up, when they were going to sleep, what they did with their day. Sometimes they were working a few days a week. Sometimes they were working most days a week. Sometimes they were working nights. Sometimes they were only working mornings. Sometimes they had to go to summer school. Some days they were going to the beach. Some days they were going to Great Adventures. Some days they were just hanging out at their house being lazy. Some days they were having lunch at noon, 2, 3, 4 p.m. Sometimes dinner was at midnight because they're with their buddies and they're screwing around. It was crazy. It was chaos. But you can adjust to chaos, okay? And this summer had these kids adjusting to chaos. We had practice a couple days a week. Outside of that, they were kind of chaotic. They were out of control. The other thing was that they weren't with another 1,000 of their friends. It was usually small groups. Most of the time also is being spent outside. Their schedule and how they relax and recover was something that they were kind of making up as they went in the best possible way. Sometimes it's falling asleep at the beach. Sometimes it's falling asleep at home. Sometimes it's taking a random nap after work. Sometimes, it's going to sleep very late, but waking up even later. Sometimes it's falling asleep at 7 p.m. because guess what? It's summer and you can do that if you want to. Turn your ringer off and just go to sleep. Now suddenly you have to wake up at a certain time every single morning. You have to go to school every single morning prepared. You have to have breakfast or not have breakfast in the morning before you go to school. And then lunch is scattered. Sometimes it's at 10 a.m. and sometimes it's at 2 p.m. You got to do the best you can. You've got schoolwork. That's an added stressor. You've got to pay attention for hours every day in a very different way than you're paying attention during the summer. A lot of people, parents and teachers included, also the student and student athletes, don't understand just how exhausting it is to suddenly have to focus every day for 5 to 7 hours a day, which is a school day, where you went from being able to not have to focus that intensely with that much intent all summer long. It's exhausting. And like I said, you go home, you suddenly have work to do. You have homework to do. It's weighing on you. It's also keeping you from probably going to sleep at the right time. And if you don't do it that night, you're probably waking up early and doing it, or stressing out on the bus, or in the hallway before class. All of these things happen in September. Like I mentioned, you're suddenly with 1,000 other people. Some schools it's 500. Some schools have like 3,000 kids in it. Well, you're indoors, in rooms, with 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 other people. You know what happens when you get a lot of people who haven't been hanging out together to suddenly hang out together for hours at a time indoors? You get sick. So there's little bugs that are starting to float around. People are starting to feel a little bit under the weather, and they're dealing with new stress and new schedules, and they're not sleeping as well as they were, and they're working harder than they were. Well, guess what happens? Yeah, the immune system starts to weaken a little bit. So you're always seemingly battling a little bit of something in September. And what we're trying to do as coaches is introduce them to a little bit more intensity. I mean, that's what would be kind of, you would imagine, with the instruction guide that comes with cross-country teams cross-country team comes back from summer. What should you do? We'll start doing 2 workouts a week, and we're going to start racing pretty much every other week, but then there's going to be dual meets, so maybe we're racing every week. All of this stuff you're throwing at a bunch of kids in September. I mean, listen, I've even brought up the social aspect. You're 14 to 18 years old. There's a lot going on. You've got friends, you've got commitments, relationships, hormones, all sorts of stuff going on. Like I said, it's chaos. It's physical chaos. It's recovery chaos. It's emotional chaos. It's chaos. Now, I kind of sort of dreaded September. Not just because I had to go back and teach 5 or 6 times a day. That wasn't it. I didn't mind that. Although I will say this for all you teachers out there, ooh, baby, how bad do your legs hurt that first week or two when you're not used to standing for hour after hour after hour. Because here's the thing, when we're not teaching, we may or may not have an off period, because a lot of times that off period is you're covering something like cafeteria duty, or you're covering for another teacher. So you suddenly realize I've been standing for like 8 of the last 9.5 hours, and then you go to practice. So that was just me feeling sorry for myself, but also telling the other teachers, I feel your pain. I feel your pain in your legs. All right, so the point is, September was a danger zone. You know what I'm talking about? Because as a coach, you are trying to increase certain things because the season started. Now, granted, the championship part of the season is November and December, but you come back in September and you're trying to get the athletes on a schedule that they're basically going to have for 3 months. You want to introduce them to workouts, speed runs and tempo runs and hill workouts. You want to introduce them to race-like efforts, not just in practice, but really in the races. And you're trying to make sure that you can navigate all of this successfully. For me, what I would do when we entered in September, when we entered into this danger zone, all right, I've said it now twice. Listen, let me just get this out of the way. Danger Zone by Kenny Loggins, absolute gem. It's in Top Gun. You know the song. But that's not what I want to talk about. What I want to talk about is Kenny Loggins the best ever at soundtrack singles. I mean, let's just go through it. Danger Zone in Top Gun. All right. That's not even his best one. He did Meet Me Halfway. That's from Over the Top. Remember the arm wrestling movie with Sylvester Stallone? I mean, first of all, the 80s were ridiculous. The fact that we could have an arm wrestling kind of movie is just, it's so stupid. It's like Roadhouse. We had a movie about a bouncer. How awesome is that? And the movie was awesome. Not like probably what this latest one is. Although I haven't seen it, so I'm not going to make fun of it. Maybe it's great. Maybe the Jake Gyllenhaal Roadhouse is great. But let's be honest. As great as it might be, it's not going to be as great as Roadhouse with Patrick Swayze and Sam Elliott. My goodness. But anyway, he also did Footloose. Yes, Footloose from Footloose. And he did I'm All Right from Caddyshack. I mean, this dude crushed it. And I heard in an interview once that he almost was tasked with doing the main song for Flashdance. Okay? He didn't. And let's be honest, that's an unbelievable song. Flashdance, Oh What a Feeling. Is it Irene Cara? Is that the name? Anyway, that's an awesome song too. So I got a lot of links I got to give you. So now we've talked about the danger zone. The reason why I talked about danger zone is because I looked at September as a danger zone as a coach. So this is why we're talking about this today. I'm going to tell you how I navigated September as a coach for my athletes in the hopes that when you come across your danger zone, which might be back to school, it might be as a parent or as a student, your danger zone might be September. It could be December, getting ready for the end of the year, holidays, traveling. It could be January, the start of the new year. It could be the end of the school year, the beginning of the summer. It could be certain times of year that are unique to you because of work or school or your obligations and responsibilities. The point is, we all have to pass through danger zones during the year. How we pass through them is going to have a lot to do with how successfully we pass through them. So I'm going to tell you how I got through the September danger zone as a high school cross-country coach, knowing what we had to do in order to get better, but also what we shouldn't do to sabotage what was already a very difficult time, that back-to-school month. So September, like I mentioned, was all about survive and advance. That's how I looked at it. They see so many other teams get to September and they think about all the things that I spoke about, or maybe they don't, and then they try to add in more running, more intense running, more volume, more focus at practice. Now, I get that. It makes sense. And in some respects, you do have to do some of that. But if you're not leading with the fact that these kids in September are going to be at a disadvantage because of September, by the time they come to practice, they're already tired. They've already gone through a practice. It was called school. They've already built up some fatigue because of going to school. They've already built up and dealt with stress because of going with school. They're already slightly diminished from an immune kind of standpoint, from the standpoint of their basic immunities that might have been very strong because they spent time outside in smaller groups all summer. Now, that's not the case. There's a higher susceptibility to getting sick. There's a higher susceptibility that there will be breakdowns or injuries, increased fatigue above and beyond what they're normally feeling in September. And that's what I want to start with, that I know coaches were all fired up and ready to go and get started in September. And the problem was that aggression towards the work led to a disadvantage from getting back together with the team on a consistent basis, where it shouldn't be a disadvantage. It should be an advantage when you get back together with the team. But remember, it's not just about getting back together with the team. It's what are you doing with the team? So if you want to personalize this for yourself and you start thinking about, okay, over the course of the year, where are my danger zones? Are there certain weeks, certain months that are hard for me? Okay, now, what can I do to get through that month as best as possible? All right, survive and advance. Okay, so some of this is going to be about how you can deal with your own September. Now, first, be smart. That's my first totally useless piece of advice unless we can dig a little bit deeper. Because what I mean by be smart is live in the moment. Another seemingly stupid thing to say, because you're like, be smart, live in the moment. Oh my God, I see these things every day online from somebody that lists like, do these 6 things and you'll be successful, and none of them mean anything. But this is what I'm talking about. In order to be smart, you have to live in the moment in September. But in order to live in the moment in September, you have to have planned ahead. So this is what I'm talking about. I always looked at the end of September. Where do we want to be at the end of September? I knew that the goal of September was to be ready to rock and really train in October. My entire focus for September was for us to be ready to rock and roll and train in October. Now think about that. In order to do that, we have to be healthy and fit, motivated, focused, inspired, and ready to go on October 1st, which means we can't be sick, tired, fatigued, uninspired, disenchanted, confused, hurt on September 30th, right? So that means I have to pay attention to today completely. I have to understand, where are we? Well, we're on September 5th, and we've had 3 days of school, and that means that for the first time in 90 plus days, for 72 straight hours, these kids have been told exactly where to be, exactly at what time. They've been told to pay attention. They've been told to look straight ahead, write down notes, be here at this time, move at this time. They're surrounding themselves with other people. They're figuring out this class is going to be really hard. This teacher is crazy. This teacher is going to be fantastic. I don't like sitting next to this person. The lunch isn't very good, but the lunch is okay on a Tuesday. I missed breakfast today. I didn't have anything to eat. Oh my goodness, lunch isn't good. How am I going to do at practice? Can I borrow some food from somebody? Gina's not being nice to me. Timmy's not being nice to me. Billy's not being nice to me. Bobby seems like a good buddy. Sheila's actually super cool. Like, all of these things are going through on a daily basis. So in order to understand that every single kid is having a version of that when they show up at practice, it allows me to realize, okay, I'm going to take that into account with what we're going to do today. So the propensity to push, hammer, we're now back together, the only time is now, is gone. It's live in the moment, understand we're on the 3rd day of school. We've had 72 straight hours of a different type of living. More stress, more work, more fatigue. Every single time they come to practice, I have to remind myself of that. So if I'm living in the moment and understanding that this is what's been going on today, yesterday, the day before, I now have the ability to be smart about the situation. I also don't have this feeling that like I'm backed up against a wall because we're back together, the season started, other teams are crushing it. No. All I have to do is set them up to train really well in October. That's what's important to me. So what I need to do is plan ahead. Where do I want to be at the end of the month? I have to live in the moment, take into account what's going on today, yesterday, the day before. Let's be here and now, and then make a smart decision. Now, if I can do that, well, fantastic. And the thing that I have back in my mind, always kind of as the mantra that I'm hearing is, remember, it's survive and advance. Now, here's the cool thing about that term, survive and advance. The key is, if you really think about it, not to survive, it's to advance. Because this is the thing. If you just survive, it doesn't mean you've advanced, right? I mean, if you just keep the terms just where they are. Let's not talk about NC State. Survive and advance. It's not just to survive. It's to advance. Because here's the thing. If you just survive, it doesn't mean you advanced. But if you advance, it means you have moved forward and survived. So I always focused on advance, okay? We're always moving forward. I don't care if this is a giant leap for mankind or a small step for man. The point is, we moved forward. That's the goal. I never understood why coaches, once they got their athletes together, started crushing them. Why? What are you doing? You do realize that if I can bring you back tomorrow and you're ready to do some work as opposed to destroyed and we've got to spend the day recovering or doing work that's mediocre because you're so tired, we're not going to get as far as if we got a little bit further every single day. That's what I'm talking about. So remember the goal. It's to advance, and that will mean we survived and advanced. It's not just survive. So many coaches, and yes, I'm talking to so many of you athletes out there that are your own coach. So many of you think the goal is to just survive. I'm going to work so hard. I'm going to crush myself so I just survive. That doesn't get you anywhere. It just gets you somebody like I always imagine like pulling themselves out of the sea, like kind of spitting up some salt water. There's like a couple barnacles in your hair. Like, what? Are you kidding? You're a joke. I'm going to beat you every single time. Look at you. You can't even get up out of the breaking waves. It's weird, So remember, survive and advance. Yes, the most important word there is advance, because that will mean you've survived. But you've survived and really thrived is what I'm trying to get at here. The other thing that's important is knowing this as a coach. And again, I'm deputizing all of you as coaches for other people or coaches for yourself. What's really important is about knowing this. Like, we're going through our September, our danger zone, whatever it may be. Our goal is to advance through this zone, not to just survive. It's to survive and advance, right? It's to set ourselves up so when we come out the other side, we're ready to rock and roll, our October. The important thing is not just to know this, it's to share this, to remind yourself of this, and to let all of your athletes know this. That's what's important. They need to know, because I'll tell you why they need to know. There's going to be confusion. And this could be if you're coaching other people, or you're going to get confused when you go through your danger zone of, why am I tired today? I mean, all I did was X run. All I did was X minutes. All I did was X meters. Why am I so tired? This is a great reminder to say, remember, September is not just about the running. It's about all of the other things. and you figure out what your equivalent is to getting back in a routine, having to go to class, having to pay attention, having to do homework, having to sit for exams and the stress associated with that, having to navigate relationships, how to show up at practice, how to start doing track workouts, how to start doing tempo runs, how to start racing, how to start deal with teammates, how to start dealing with, the people in the hallway, sitting in your classroom, like group projects, crazy teachers. Okay, we all have our equivalents. So remember, it's about more than just the running. So when you share this concept, whether it's with an athlete, a teammate, or with yourself, you're reminding yourself, hey, pump the brakes here. The last thing we need to do now is beat ourselves up when we're already getting beat up going through the danger zone. You know what I mean? So that's just another thing you want to do, okay, is to know this, share this, and then remind yourself about this throughout your period, whether it's a week, a day, an hour, or a month, like September was for me as a coach. The other thing is be inventive. That was the other way I got through September. Be inventive. I was always looking for ways to get the work done in a way that involved less work. Now that's different than cheating the system. It's different than skimping on things. It's different than finding shortcuts. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, what's a way to get the work done without so much work? So for instance, we would introduce morning runs. This was a way to say, we're going to take a little bit of the intensity, the volume out of our afternoon practices. And what we're going to do is we're going to put them in the morning. We're going to meet a little bit earlier, and we're going to get in shorter runs that are not going to beat you up. But we're then going to take some of the mileage off the afternoon runs, so you're not getting beaten up after practice. Now, obviously, anytime you're doing this, you have to figure out, okay, well, if we're trying to do this a different way and we're saving some of the workload, well, we're probably also stressing somewhere, right? Yes. So we're probably going to be sacrificing about 30 minutes of sleep. So how can we be more efficient so we can get to bed a little bit earlier or have better sleep? So we would talk about those things. Like, how can we be a little bit more efficient with our homework? Or how can we sleep better? And we would talk about, keeping the room cold, keeping the room dark, having a routine at night. These are the things that we would do, but we would explain the reason why we're having morning runs is so instead of having to run, I'm making it up, 8 miles in the afternoon, we can do 6 or 7, and we can do 3 in the morning. So we're going to get the volume, we're going to get the work in, but this is a way to maybe not have as much stress physically during this danger zone of September where you've got so many other stressors. So you want to be inventive. You can play with workouts. You can have maybe a tempo one day, and then the next day you can do a shorter speed run. You could have them back to back. Or you could do something where you start the day with a tempo run, but it's not that long, and then you head into some intervals, and they don't have to be as fast because you got some junk in your legs from the tempo run. So it's a way of getting rid of some of the intensity you need in a speed run by adding a tempo run that's not going to beat you up as much, and then being able to slow down the speed of the speed intervals. So be inventive. When you're going through these hard times, okay, these danger zones, so to speak, it's an opportunity for you to try to figure out, is there a better way of doing this? Because I always looked at it as, September is so hard. Maybe part of the reason why it's so hard is because I'm not navigating it as well as I should be, as I could be. Maybe I need to innovate a little bit. Maybe I need to be a little bit more inventive on how we're going to get through this danger zone. So maybe it's not that dangerous anymore, right? So look at it as an opportunity to be inventive, all right? And take more advantage of the things that you took for granted. I kind of hinted at it before, but I think this is also super important. Take more advantage of the things you take for granted, like sleep. All summer long, we kind of take it for granted when you're a teenager. You're just going to sleep when you want to, or you can, right? Like if you're not working, you can take a nap, right? I mean, that's just the way it is. So take advantage of the fact that your sleep can be a little bit more focused. You can do a better job sleeping. It's the same thing with things like fueling and hydrating. take advantage of some of the things that maybe because it's summer and there isn't racing coming up, or there isn't, an intensity to the training that demands you to be so focused on it. Well, now you can be a little bit more focused on your fueling and your hydrating, and they're going to have huge benefits. Huge benefits. So there are things that you're not taking advantage of, that you're basically taking for granted maybe before you get into the danger zone, that you should look at. Adding things like laughter to your life is a great way to help navigate getting through your September, your danger zone. Because what does laughter do? Well, it lowers your blood pressure, it aids in recovery, it de-stresses you. So make sure you're setting up an environment where you're laughing and having fun. To me, that was one of the most important things as a coach, was making sure the athletes at practice laughed their asses off a lot. It doesn't mean we can't work hard. We can work really, really hard and be laughing a lot. But I'll tell you what, that laughter is going to aid in the recovery of the work we're doing. It's also going to aid in the recovery of the work they did during the day. So things like laughter, things like fueling, things like sleep, things like hydration, planning. I mean, the routine, I mentioned it earlier, is a little bit like a curse when you start going to school, but it eventually can become a blessing. We say, okay, we're now getting into the habit of falling asleep roughly at the same time because you developed that routine. We are getting more efficient with the homework or the work that you have from your job or your responsibilities back at home. And as a result, you're seeing the fact that there's a rhythm to this, right? And that should give you confidence. It should remind you that you can do this. So you can look for those things where the increased focus in school, at work, at home is leading to better focus on your run, better focus about your running and the things you have to do surrounding your running to get better. So try to take advantage of the things that maybe you were taking for granted. The other thing is allow for some grace, right? And remove some of the stress by anticipating your September. You know what I mean? I mean, this is the thing. When we would go in, I would let the athletes know you're going to be tired, even when there's no reason to be tired because of the running. So you can't blame the running for being this fatigued. You're going to be this fatigued because of everything else you have going on. Because I would see when I first started coaching, a lot of kids would struggle in September. Everything was going so great in August, and then suddenly they're like, why am I not better, feeling stronger, running better, running stronger, now that we've been together for 10 days of practice, all these days at school, why am I not improving? And it was because we've been back at school for 10 days, because you have tests, because you have homework, because your schedule's weird. Like, that's why. And I realized, oh, they don't know. I have to tell them. And the best time to tell them is ahead of time. So they're not concerned. They're not panicking. They're not stressing about the fact that I'm dragging today and all we've done are some recovery runs. Yeah, but you're not dragging because of the recovery runs. You're dragging because of everything else in your life beyond the recovery runs. So this is not something else to stress about and therefore add more fatigue into your life. So that was something that was super important, was just, allowing that grace and removing some of the stress by anticipating what September is going to be like. And remember, I'm using all of these examples as me talking to an athlete. I'm just going to keep saying over and over again, remember, so much of this is you reminding yourself. Because I'll tell you what, as a coach, you have an advantage. Every time you remind an athlete of something important, you're reminding yourself. So that was my advantage, was I would sometimes see an athlete struggling. I would go over there, remind them of something, and I would hear it myself. So it was kind of like being, it was kind of like teaching two people, coaching two people, the athlete and myself, okay? The other thing is be okay with things not being okay. That was the other thing. I was always very relaxed once I started to look at September a very different way. So if somebody started to get a cold, they started to get run down, somebody started to feel like their legs were a little dead, or they started to lose a little bit of confidence because I knew that, maybe they weren't navigating this danger zone as well as maybe they wanted to or they should, I didn't get upset. I didn't get stressed because I knew we were going to figure it out. I just had to talk to them and help them get through it. So it really helped me realize I'm okay with things not being okay, because guess what? It's September. Things aren't going to be okay. That's September. That's what it is. That's my danger zone. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be close to perfect. And that's okay. I'm not expecting it to be. I'm going to navigate an entire month of not okay. And if it's not okay, it's okay. Because I know it's okay. And I'm not going to worry about it. I know what the goal is. Let's get to the end of this month healthy. Let's get to the end of this month confident, happy, a closer team, having done the work we needed to do. Not the work that we wanted to do if everything was perfect, because that was never going to happen. And if we tried to make that happen, we were going to show up in October confused, scared, angry, frustrated, and not running that well, and definitely not prepared to take on what we needed to take on in October. Because remember, I was trying to set us up for October being the hardest month of training we were going to do. That's what I looked at it. So the hardest month was September, but the hardest training was going to be October. That's what I was hoping for. And that's the thing that's kind of wild, is it seems almost like it makes no sense, but if you think about it, actually it really does. September was going to be the hardest month for us as a cross-country team, even though it wasn't going to be the hardest month of running. October was going to be the hardest month of running, but it wasn't going to be the hardest month for us because we were going to be strong, capable, confident, and ready to do the work. We were going to be closer as a team because of September and how we navigated it. We were going to see the fact that we could get through times that weren't okay, but we were okay. And that's what set us up for October. We were going to be ready for it. And the other thing, which was it's funny. I always say, it's not always the race that decides things. I knew on October 1st we were going to beat a lot of teams, not because of October 1st, but because of September and how they navigated September. They might have worked harder and done more work than us, but they were going to be wiped out in October, and we were going to be able to move forward. You know what? I'm going to give you I just thought of this. This is the way that I would have my athletes run hills and races. I said this should be relaxed, where you're focusing on your breathing and staying light. I want you completely calm and focused on your breathing going up a hill. I want light steps, shorter steps. We're kind of dancing up the hill. Now, a lot of athletes are told from their coaches or believe, because a hill is looked at as a harder type of run than a flat run, right? That the goal on a hill is to hammer, to push, to try to pass people going up a hill. I tell my athletes, look, if people want to fly by you, let them fly by you. You stay relaxed, control your breathing, stay light on your feet, shorter steps, drive your arms, just be swinging them nice and loose, but they're going to help. And then what I want you to do is spend the next 50 to 75 yards after the hill really focused on your breathing and getting your form back, because your form is different going up a hill than compared to flat. So for me, that was September. And I had some teams that would fly by us in September, and we would stay nice and relaxed. But the problem is, when they get to the top of the hill, they're cooked. And when we're focusing on our breathing and getting our form back and our rhythm back, they're recovering. We don't have to recover. We just have to get our form back, and then we push. And once we push, you're done. You're never going to see us again. We're going to come by you, and when we pass you at the top of a hill or just past the top of a hill, that's it. Game, set, match. If you pass someone after the hill, 50 yards after the hill, you own their soul, basically. That's just how it is. And that was our October. We were ready to move forward. We were ready to advance because we had been advancing. You had set it up where you got out of September and survived. But that was it. You couldn't advance anymore because you were so tired from trying to get through the danger zone as fast and as aggressively as you could, as opposed to as intelligently and safely as you could. Because if you can do those two things, you're going to run well. You're going to train well, and you're going to set yourself up for what's next. That's why I wanted to talk about this right now, because I know a lot of people are going through that right now. I know a lot of high school teams are going through that right now. I know a lot of college teams are going through that right now. I know a lot of runners are going through that right now because it's the beginning of a school year and things change for so many people. It's the middle, or not the middle, we're getting towards like the 2/3 for many people for their fall racing season. You're going to be navigating these things. And like I said, it doesn't have to be a full month. It could be a week. It could be an hour. You want to navigate it the same way. So that's why this episode was episode 68. That's why I wanted to do it right now. And I think it's a perfect time to do a Mindset Minute with Mindset Performance Coach Extraordinaire, Coach Tammy Bennett. She's going to take you through a Mindset Minute. And after that, well, we're on our home stretch. Okay, without any further ado, Coach Tammy, take it over.
So when you're going through a hard patch, and at some point in your life you will, because that's part of being a human who's alive, it might help you to think of this image. You are a sailor on a boat, and it is a really bad storm, and it is raining and lightning and thundering, and the waves are crashing, and it feels like you're going to tip over and sink at any moment. But you just hang on tight to that. It's a creaky old wooden ship for some reason in my imagery here, but you're going to just hang on tight. You're going to grit your teeth. You're going to just close your eyes really tight against the wind and the rain and the lightning, and you're going to ride all of those waves one at a time, and they're going to feel really scary and hard, but you're going to make it through. Your hands are going to be cramping, but you just keep hanging on wave after wave. And then the sky breaks and the sunshine comes through, and you've made it through. And you laugh with your other sailor mates about how hard that was and that you survived it.
As always, she's amazing. So there it is. Thank you so much, Coach Tammy, for giving us that Mindset Minute. And yes, as always, I will have her links in the show notes. Thank you, everyone, for being here for episode 68. Survive and Advance. And I think this was one that really needed to be heard, and I hope it helped. And it's something I think about every September, trying to get through this really tough month for a lot of people. And again, your September could be February, could be April, could be July, it could be a week in March. The point is, we all have our danger zones, but we can get through them. So don't ever hesitate to ask for help, and don't ever hesitate to help. So until next time, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and I'll meet you on that next starting line. Thank you so much for listening to Coach Bennett's podcast today. And if you're not already following or subscribed to the podcast on whatever platform you're listening, well, I really wish you would, because it helps a lot. Also, check out the show notes, because you'll find a link to Coach Bennett's newsletter, as well as all the social media sites that I'm on. Places like Threads and Facebook and Instagram and Mastodon and YouTube, and even the artist formerly known as Twitter. Whatever that dumpster fire is called today, you'll find a link to it, because I'm on there. Thank you so much again for listening, and until next time, take care of yourself.